And then we got a very nice image reading open CBDC to process 1.84 million transactions per second. As the Boston Fed and MIT collab is complete. And why is this interesting? Well, we all know Gilbert has been at the Boston Fed a couple of times. They're working with MIT on most likely this, but also the LangChain part and the ODAP, which is now SAT, this Secure Asset Transfer Protocol. These are cool things. Yeah, no, I wanted to go to the CBDC thing.
Sure. Oh, yeah, CBDCs. Yeah. Okay, then we're going to CBDCs. Yes.
Tim is already getting his twitch.
I'm already feeling it in my neck. I'm getting those red, itchy spots.
Yeah. Well, what is interesting, this guy, Richard Turin, link in the description, on LinkedIn, wrote this, and this is the third paragraph. Not a day goes by when I read some hysterical hit piece about CBDCs. The themes are always the same. Governments will turn your money off.
They literally are.
You will have an account with the central bank and your money will expire. Follow the money. Most of these posts come from people selling either gold, crypto, or survival bunkers. And I think he's right.
He's completely right.
And he has some arguments. So the first line is a little bit cringe. Two flames, must read. The ECB makes clear it will not know who, how much, or where people spend. So stop the anti-CBDC hysteria. The ECB lays out in no uncertain terms the role of the euro system and supervised intermediaries. Spoiler alert, it's not too different from credit cards today. I've said this for years, and so have we. There's a couple of arguments here, and I know this is a little bit of reading, but I want to take you through this because these are quotes. He actually states this. So let's look at critical passages, most reproduced in full because they are so clear. Number one, the euro system would not be able to infer how many digital euro any individual end user held, nor to infer end users' payment patterns. The digital euro would be designed so that it minimized euro system involvement in the processing of user data, while ensuring the smooth functioning of the digital euro and the ability of the euro system to perform its tasks. Makes sense, right? For normal people, what would their arguments be for knowing all this, for monitoring all of this? What do they have to gain? For rational people, they'd say nothing. And there's obviously a lot of people that say, yeah, but they want to know what you spend. And they want to know where you go so they can control you. Okay. Number two, the euro system must retain full control over digital euro issuance and settlement. Settlement is defined as the completion of a payment transaction with the aim of irrevocably discharging all payment obligations between payer and payee through the transfer of funds. The two technical tasks are: one, settlement verification, and two, settlement recording. This also makes sense, right? You cannot distribute this. You cannot have some untrusted, unknown party. You can't have this, how do you say, decentralized. You can have it distributed, but not decentralized. So supervised intermediaries is number three. Supervised intermediaries would perform all end user facing roles, such as opening digital euro accounts or wallets and associated payment operations, as is currently the case for the bank accounts and services that customers are already used to. They would offer user-facing services, including conducting Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering checks, and would provide devices and end-user interfaces to pay with digital euro. They would also perform tasks related to the funding and defunding of users' digital euro accounts or wallets. This also makes sense. So if you're with a bank, they're offering you a credit card. if you're with crypto.com or with Binance and you have a credit card, this is the exact same damn thing. If you're with your current bank, they usually have like these identifier things, or what's those two-factor authentication things where you put your card in. This is what they're talking about here. This will obviously be provided by them. And in this case, that will just be the bank that you're just working with right now. Number 4 is offline payments. So for an offline peer-to-peer validated digital euro settlement in a local storage device would be a suitable solution. Fantastic news. Yeah, and this is also mandatory. It's like cash, right? It makes perfect sense. I was in the liquor store today and there was no data, but I could still pay with my phone. As you guys know, I've been paying with my phone for a very long time. And that also works if you're in airplane mode or whatever, because it just caches it, CACHE, and it just sends it when it's done. Sorry, when you have a connection again. So the tech is already here. Regulation is still on the way. So the takeaways are: stop the CBDC hysteria. The ECB will not know how much you spend or where. The relationship with your bank or newer intermediaries like cell phone carriers is intact. The ECB will run the computers that quote unquote settle, which makes perfect sense. And the ECB finally accepts offline payments. They've been on the fence for ages. And this is the reality, and this is the truth, right? And just the feeling that all new technology will lead to more control, I think is a little bit hilarious. But it's also, and there's a guy writing a comment on this, because I also went through the comments. This man, Dr. Thierry Teuma, yeah, with some of the arguments of the anti-CBDC community, one can no longer help but think of the supporters of the horse-drawn carriage in the early days of the automobile. Every argument, no matter how half-baked, is greedily seized upon. The main thing being to create an impression of doubt about the new in the listeners' readers. But history, and not in this case, and not only in this case, teaches us that the new is making its way into everyday life. That's good. Usually humans call such a process evolution, right? We've shown this in a different episode about the internet. A passing fad, right? It's everything that's new is scary, and it's good because the people that are like really super paranoid, they ask the questions and they help form the spectrum so we can find a nice middle road. But there's a lot of rational people that are also jumping on that bandwagon, just rehashing information without thinking for themselves, and that those people are usually also very loud because they have something to commit to, which is a shame. There was also a comment somewhere, and I'm going to leave this topic now, but they are going to open source or at least open up the code to a degree so it can be audited third party and even by you probably if you have an interest in doing that, because they really have nothing to hide. And since it's the European bank, there's a lot of countries involved. They will all do their own due diligence. So there's actually a majority vote going on. I mean, not like a vote, but kind of like a vote to see if everything suits everybody. And I know there's a lot of, how do you say? Ultimate, well, whatever.
There's a lot of, what do you mean?
Yeah, so
Friction.
everybody needs to be on board. So everybody will check, right? All the countries in the EU that are going to use this digital euro. Yeah, and everybody is like a word. I forgot the word. Is it an infinitive? No, it's an ultimate, whatever.
I mean, it's this process of getting everyone. Yeah, I see what you mean. Like consultation. I don't know.
It's never everybody, but just to paint a picture.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I don't really have the English. Neither do I have the Dutch word for it.
Yeah.
Um,
But to get all the people on board, all the countries on board, the code will need to be vetted by every country. The Netherlands is not going to agree if they do not know what is in the code. And the same goes for a lot of other countries. So again, there, everything will revert to the mean once again. We'll see. What we see here is from the Digital Pound Foundation. This is also about CBDCs. And in this case, it is Project Hamilton, which is the Boston Fed and the MIT, the trial that they set up. They announced that the Project Hamilton is complete, and the open CBDC Coinbase provides a resource to evaluate design choices and ensure that a potential future CBDC could serve the public's interest. And then we got a very nice image reading open CBDC to process 1.84 million transactions per second. As the Boston Fed and MIT collab is complete. And why is this interesting? Well, we all know Gilbert has been at the Boston Fed a couple of times. They're working with MIT on most likely this, but also the LangChain part and the ODAP, which is now SAT, the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol. These are cool things. Yeah, so in February 2022, the team announced the project's first results, released a white paper. Then they handled 1.7 million transactions. Now they're up to 1.84 million. And here's a little bit of a, it attracted some scrutiny from lawmakers, Project Hamilton, because they could get an unfair advantage. And there's ongoing research by the Federal Reserve into the digital dollar, and apparently they are competing in a way to this. But they conclude with, however, the US ultimately does not have a definitive plan for a CBDC, and there's room for growth and expansion. And even so, technically, every state in the US would have a separate CBDC if they wanted. It could all be pegged to the dollar, and it could still be interoperable. Because of some very interesting project that we know. But looking at this article and looking at that the US is like the farthest behind in the world, give or take, when it comes to regulation, planning, and all those things. I mean, officially, right? So what they're doing in the background, I do not know. I am not thinking they're sitting on their hands, watching idly how everybody is changing the world.
for sure. I mean, this is a completely political matter, and I mean the technical capabilities are being rolled out, and that's what we're seeing. And luckily, now in the case of Project Hamilton, they did make major steps forward, and they are following schedule, because, well, those things started around 2017, 2018, first concepts. Now the first studies being started in 2020, end of 2022, study completed. So that is going at lightning speed, if you ask me. It's just going to be those boomer politicians who need to make the actual decisions. And politics is slow, man. It's a really slow process before you get something through. Well, that entire.
Didn't Martin say something about this, that the tech is already here? That we could do this right now, but we just need the regulations and the standards to catch up. This is also right. It's like the open door that we're entering time and time again at the Quamfy Show.
Yeah.
The regulations and the standards need to be there before people jump on board. That's also why LangChain will be so interesting.
Give you absolutely a bit anecdotal, because I don't want to necessarily dive into LangChain. I was having cake this week at my work because we finally managed to get a plan through, and it took 20 years before it passed. They took 20 years to get certain regulation passed.
And
So when I was in
elaborate a
primary
little bit on
school,
what the regulation was about?
okay, I'm working in this field of urban planning, and like to get in Dutch it's called a bestemmingsplan, so like a zoning, I'm not sure if it's zoning regulation, like urban planning regulation. And it took them 20 years to get it through because everyone was saying something about it. They had to constantly fight over it. And that's not necessarily a good example, but that's a showcase of how slow government, and especially in these kind of cases, can be. Because you have so many actors, and really when you want to do something like this you want to have the entirety of in this case the EU and the Eurozone want to say something about it, it's gonna take a long time. And that's the reason why Jarno was talking about LACchain. Different setting with a bit less heavy regulatory structures. So you can
I mean, if they can get it to work there and they can have the proof of concept done there, then getting this implemented can just be a simple case of copy paste, right?
Yeah.
And tweak it a little bit and be done with it. Well, we will see. We will see. If we'd have central bank digital currencies in 2008, we probably wouldn't have had the financial crisis, says Gilbert Verdian.
Spicy. I'm not sure if I agree about that.
Let's have
CBDCs are no longer a fictional concept. These are real. They are happening. It's really driven from the top down. It's not just the central banks, but the governments of countries are putting policy out there saying, we will have a CBDC, we will have a more digital economy. It increases GDP, creates jobs, and it makes us more competitive in the global landscape. Personally, I think CBDCs are a great tool for not only the technology side, having payments automated and programmable and smart, but also on the policy side. It really gives central banks the ability to control monetary and fiscal policies in a new way.
More granular?
It's more granular. You have better visibility of risk, from a resilience and systemic risk perspective. If we had CBDCs, we probably wouldn't have had the financial crisis in 2008 because the contagion effect you would have predicted and prevented once you see something happening within a part of the financial system. And if there is a contagion, you can actually have remedies in place to prevent it, spreading to other parts of the system. So from a risk perspective, it's a great technology.
Trying to talk, but I had myself on mute. I said, Gilbert's here talking about contagion effects. So yeah, indeed, that would mean that central banks could step in earlier and prevent systemic risk.
Yeah, and quicker, right? Because right now, what you see with the Fed with their quantitative tightening is they're trying to get, at first they printed a ton of money, and now they need to get that money out of the system. But to get that money out of the system, they need to get people spending, or they need to do that with rates or what's it. It takes a ton of time to get all that money organically out of the system. And because everything is so slow and finality is so slow, and you got all these clearing houses and things and Badoo's and what's it, which if you have CBDCs, you can very easily just close one tab, open one up, and you're going to have instant effects on this. So if there is indeed, like Gilbert says, a contagion, and he said probably, right? But if you have one part that's crumbling, and to prevent everything else from falling, if you can, in a way, cut that off, and this is like way above my thinking and understanding, but to me, it makes sense because, like we saw with FTX, there was shit on one end, and then it just spread and spread and spread. Besides the rumors, right? But there was also financial fallout because there's a lot of people that were exposed, and so on. It was kind of similar, like you said, to 2008. So how would you think that it would not have made a difference having CBDCs?
It depends, I think, on the role that CBDCs start to play. Because that would assume, if you follow Gilbert's logic, that everything would run on CBDC. So then you wouldn't have any kind of parallel system. Makes any sense? So you would definitely, if you have total control, you can have full management of what's going on. If you don't have that, then sure, you could still partially, I think, manage the risk. But it would be way harder. And I doubt in how far the legislation can go in order to have the total control of giving the central bank like full authority of what they're doing. Makes any sense. Like, I'm still trying. I think Gilbert is kind of not saying that I'm an expert. I don't want to say anything about that, but I think he is oversimplifying really complicated stuff.
Okay. And my thoughts are in this case, right? And then we go over to background. I mean, he has the knowledge and the experience to reasonably oversimplify this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think he has such a great understanding that if he states like, okay, we could have probably stopped the contagion from spreading with the use of CBDCs, why would we then doubt that? Because the banks,
because he's a vendor of this technology at the end of the day.
Yeah, that was your argument in the prep, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's never going to argue against it. So he will oversimplify his thesis.
Where's my tinfoil hat? You really think that? You think he will?
He's not. I reasonably think that sure he will have a point partially, but he's also selling this technology, right? Or he's not selling it, but he is promoting. Yeah. So I'm not arguing against it.
No, that's fair.
I mean, certain industries will also argue that they are essential, like the fossil company like Shell will argue that they are essential if you want to transition your energy system. They will not place themselves out of it. That they will be a key part of it. If you listen to their story, it makes sense, but then you also need to realize where it comes from. So I'm not saying that he's not right. I'm just a bit skeptical if you could prevent financial crisis in the future.
Why?
I think it's, well, at the end of the day, it's like inherent to capitalism itself that you will get some sort of crisis. And sure, perhaps the contagion thing that we saw in 2008, we might solve that, but then you will, one way or the other, have a crisis somewhere else. So I do agree there, but saying that we won't have any financial crisis, I think it's a bit.
Yeah. I agree that essentially every economy with the current system will have a blow-off top, but that is because we simply cannot move the money around quick enough to prevent the problems from compounding, right?
Yeah, true.
So
I mean, I just have to see how this plays out. I think we're making very bold statements, and they might be true, but they might also be untrue. And I'm just not drawing any conclusions here, and sure, I think
nor should we, because we are not economists.
No,
we cannot even agree if something is 30% or 20 degrees. So let's not go there. But
no, indeed, I think economists themselves will also not find out because it's just really complex stuff. Like engineers will make you believe that they can solve issues, but then you kind of engineer your way out, and you will find that society is more difficult than that. So then we'll create new issues. In the 1950s, they thought they had solved everything, but by doing that, they created new problems. So seeing everything through a technological lens and saying, hey, we can using techno solutions, you will create eventual new problems. So we'll just have to see how this plays out. But it's an interesting statement, and I would love to invite someone who can say more about it than we do.